Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
You're listening to Bloomberg Businessweek with Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, Kara, earlier we heard from the CEOs of some very well-known companies. Microsoft, Dell.
Heard of them.
NVIDIA.
Big time.
ServiceNow.
Yeah, these are all well known, right? They're household names today, yet weren't when they got their start years ago with the help of venture capitalists and venture money. So what was it that made a venture capitalist or a group of them or a VC firm decide to invest and make a financial bet on one company over others? What were they thinking? And that's what a new book explores, and how that mindset can apply more broadly for decision makers in our world.
With us, we've got Professor of Private Equity and Finance at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business, also the founder and director of the Venture Capital Initiative, Professor Ilya Strebulaev, on his book, The Venture Mindset, How to Make Smarter Bets and Achieve Extraordinary Growth. Ilya joins us from San Francisco. Ilya, good to have you with us here. You make a point at the beginning of the book saying this is not a book about venture investing. It's a book about the venture investing mindset. So tell us how exactly the mindset of a venture capitalist, what those people do when they succeed, and perhaps more importantly, what they do when they fail, will make any decision maker better at their job.
Thank you. It's great to be here. First of all, the book is about the venture mindset principles that smart VCs follow. And the first principle to follow is why home runs matter and strikeouts don't. Because you talked about success, which is home runs for VCs, and failure, which is about strikeouts. And the venture mindset could be described as the new mental mindset that you should follow in the innovation-driven world, where you face a lot of uncertainty, a lot of unpredictability. And VCs have been facing this hostile environment for more than 50 years, making decisions and catching home runs. Do you know that if you look at all the companies that became public in the United States in the last 50 years, every second one of them was venture-backed? Do you know that 6 or 7 or 8 companies out of top 10 by market cap today were venture-backed when they were small companies? And moreover, as my research shows at Stanford, there's causality, which means that had there been no venture capital industry, likely there would have been many of those companies that changed our lives, such as Apple, Netflix, Airbnb, Microsoft, NVIDIA, and so on. So this is what the venture mindset is really about.
Well, what do you make, though, of the venture mindset back in the 1999-2000 era, when it seems like money was just thrown at anything with a .com after it? And a lot of those companies didn't exist for very long. So what do you make of that venture mindset? And was that failure good in some ways?
That is a great question. First of all, what we discuss in our book is FOMO, F-O-M-O, which is fear of missing out.
I think it's something a lot of our investing audience is familiar with at this point.
NVIDIA,
Absolutely.
anybody?
Yeah.
Or anyway, go ahead.
Absolutely. But what is really interesting is that smart VCs are trying to avoid FOMO as much as possible. And one way to avoid it is what a friend of mine, Alex Rampell from Andreessen Horowitz, calls it: conviction must beat consensus. Which means that if everybody is trying to invest in something, maybe that is the time to invest in something else. So if we look in the late 1990s, or indeed if we look at crypto, okay, or if we look at some other bubbles in the last 10, 15 years, many of them were driven, in fact, by investors that were not following the venture mindset principles, in fact. In the 1990s, there were also a lot of amazing companies born, and a lot of investors made great investment decisions.
I'm wondering about the idea of saying no more often than you say yes, because that's something that I hear about venture capital. It's that you have to be really selective when it comes to deciding which firms you're going to deploy money into. So how do you take that mindset and apply it beyond the venture capital world? And explain what you mean in the chapter that you write you have to be selective, but not in the way that you may think.
So first of all, this is the principle called say no 100 times. And indeed, my research shows that
it's like being a parent, right? But maybe on a parent, it's more on steroids. You say it a lot more. But go ahead, please.
When we think about how venture capitalists make decisions, for each investment they make, they say no more than 100 times.
Wow.
Okay? Now, if you think about this, if you spend a lot of time trying to decide how to make these no's, how to say these no's, in fact, you will have no time to proceed with a good due diligence. So what venture capitalists do to make it more efficient? What I've discovered is that they use two different decision-making modes at the beginning and at the end of their journey with each deal. At the beginning, or at the top of their deal funnel, they use what I call the fast lane approach. And at the bottom, they use the slow lane approach. And I think all of us can benefit from this. So what is the fast lane approach? You are approaching the potential investment opportunity, or indeed any potential decision, by asking, why should I not proceed with even thinking about this investment decision? So this not is critical. If you ask instead, why should I do it? Then you will go down a completely different path. And this is what VCs are doing. They're asking themselves the question, why we should not do it?
Yeah.
And then try to identify a red flag. So they use red flags, and red flags could be different for different types of investments. But once they hit a red flag,
right,
they will stop thinking about investing in this opportunity and will move on. Here is an interesting point. Writing this book was great fun because as a part of writing, my co-author and I watched hundreds of hours of Shark Tank episodes.
I love Shark Tank. You're speaking.
You're not the only one.
I love
People
it.
love that show.
It's fascinating.
So many love it. In fact, we loved it so much, we also watched the Canadian version called Dragon's Den.
Watch that too.
Now, but we watched it for research purposes.
Yeah.
And this is what we looked at. We looked at how sharks and dragons ask questions, and when it is clear that the answer failed or raised a red flag, even their facial expression suggested that they lost entire interest. They just completely checked out. This is what smart VCs do as well. The moment they hit a red flag, they move on to the next deal. Here is a quick example for you. Let me take back you to 2007, when the first iPhone was released. And file sharing was in the air, but was not yet possible because there was no Wi-Fi, there were no smartphones. One investor of Sequoia Capital at the time, his name was Samir Gandhi, was very interested in this. And with his partners, he tried to prepare his mind. He tried to meet with a lot of startups. He, I think, met with like more than 50 teams that were developing file sharing. Mm-hmm. And he decided not to invest in any. He said no to every single one of them. Why? Because they hit his red flag. What is his red flag? Well, it turns out to be his red flag was, I wanted to meet, he told me, a team from whom I could learn how to do it. Nobody was doing this.
Right.
But I spent a lot of time trying to identify what that was. And I was meeting with those teams, and then I was not learning anything. And then he met with two guys who didn't have any money. I actually think they didn't have the money to fly across the country. They took a Greyhound.
What ended up happening to these folks you were speaking about?
So I was talking about Samir Gandhi and his partners at Sequoia, and they were all excited about file sharing. And Samir and his partners interviewed dozens and dozens of startup teams. And they said no every single time. And one of the major reasons they said no was because they did not learn anything. And then they met those two guys who didn't have, as I said, money to, I think even to fly across the country. They took a Greyhound bus. So they didn't have a prototype. And then they met with the Sequoia partners. And I think in about half an hour, there was a decision to proceed with the investment. Why? Because even though those two guys did not know, could not do anything, they in fact thought through all cranes and nooks about how they're going to implement everything, how they're going to execute everything. And so Sequoia ended up investing in what turned out to be Dropbox.
It turned out Dropbox.
So
okay, I was waiting for which company it was going to. I knew it was going to be a company that's like a household name now and one that was going to be successful. Dropbox is what it was. Every nook and cranny in the thought process, Carol.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But that is the power of saying no 100 times. Otherwise, you would not end up in Dropbox. You would end up with another failure, another strikeout.
It's like when I shop.
Go on.
No. Okay, do it. No, I'm having fun with you. But I do wonder if you have some thoughts, though, on artificial intelligence and how it might help a venture capitalist go through deals. I think, last year we were having conversations about how that it could help a VC investor who might not look at some smaller deals because it just wasn't worth their time. But if you use some kind of AI screening who can kind of go through some of it, it might bring some deals that they might have said no on before, might bring it to their attention. But any smart kind of thought about that in terms of how that might help venture capitalists still kind of stick to their, red flags and their mindset, but also provide maybe some new opportunities?
AI is going to be very helpful for VCs. And the reason behind this is because one of the principles of the venture mindset is getting outside four walls, which means that you are trying to diversify where your sources come from. For example, a friend of mine who is a venture capitalist in San Francisco, his name is Paul Arnold. He is the founder of Switch VC. So he and his team develop an algorithm. They go through LinkedIn and other websites every single day. And the moment there is a founder who is working on some kind of stealth startup or studying anything new, that founder will go into the algorithm. And then the algorithm churns, and some of the founders, according to some criteria, will kind of bubble up so that sometimes Paul will identify founders far away from Silicon Valley, far away from California, that are working on something interesting. But that is getting more sources.
Yeah.
So then to identify which of those sources are going to be good, you have to go back to the venture mindset principles of saying no 100 times.
Well,
So I think AI is mostly working at the beginning of the funnel or
right.
expanding the funnel, not at the final process of the funnel. So here, the venture capitalists still make the decisions themselves.
Ilya, you talk about red flags by venture capitalists, and I do wonder about, here we are once again talking about Black entrepreneurs, women entrepreneurs still struggling to kind of get seen and get that VC money. It just doesn't flow like it does to white men. It's just, you know the numbers, you know the data. I don't need to explain it to you. So is it because for a venture capitalist that comes up as a red flag? What is that about?
That is a great question. And I think that is a very important problem these days. First of all, let me go back and tell you about one of my research studies. What we did is we created with my PhD student 50 fake startups. We had a lot of fun creating those startups with fake websites, fake profiles, and so on. And then we created 200 fake founders. Why 200? Because each startup had 4 fake founders. Either it had a white man founder, a white woman, an Asian man, or an Asian woman. And then we created blurbs, decks, and whatnot. And we sent the emails from these fake founders about these fake startups to actual venture capitalists, also to actual active angel investors. We sent in total about 80,000 emails. And we checked the responses. And when I say the response, what we say is a positive response. For example, can we meet on Zoom for a chat? Can you send us the pitch deck? Can you go and meet my partner who is interested in this deal, and so on? First of all, what we really found interesting is that the response rate was very high. When I started this project, every single VC whom I talked to told me not to do it because they don't respond to cold calls. Well, we got between 8% and 15%, like every 12th to every 6th venture capitalist and angel investor responded.
Right.
In fact, most successful VCs were more likely to respond. And we also found out that venture capitalists, the most successful ones, tend to respond more to female entrepreneurs and to Asian entrepreneurs as well. So the conclusion here is that it is not at the beginning of the process where the problem lies. It typically lies towards the end of the process. And here is something that is really important.
And just got about 30 seconds left. Yeah, forgive me. Go ahead.
Many VC firms make decision by consensus. You know what consensus is?
Yeah.
It's like 6 people together in the same room have to make decisions. And I think this is where the problem lies, as my research shows. So to resolve this problem, to diversify the founders, we need to change how we make decisions in groups. And again, this is the part of the venture mindset principles. Agree to disagree.
Interesting.
Really interesting.
Oh my gosh, what a great way to wrap up. Really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for stopping by and spending some time with us. That is, of course, Professor Ilya Strebulaev. His new book is The Venture Mindset, How to Make Smarter Bets and Achieve Extraordinary Growth. He is Professor of Private Equity and Finance at Stanford University's Graduate School of Business and the founder and director of the Venture Capital Initiative. We didn't even really get into private equity, which would be a whole other
He's got to come back.
conversation.
Got to come back and visit us.
I bet he has thoughts on private credit, too.
I bet he does.
All right, maybe when it comes out, soft cover.